It was the birth of ethnographic anthropology with Bronislaw Malinowski, that's that guy over there, as opposed to the armchair anthropology of Tyler and Fraser that brought these issues to the fore, and it was E. Evans Pritchard, this guy here, a student of Malinowski, who allowed us to appreciate for the first time the fact that those we had previously considered to be primitive, inferior and irrational were in actuality quite the opposite. In 1926, Evans Pritchard conducted fieldwork with the Azandi in Sudan, and he became increasingly interested in Zandi witchcraft and divination beliefs. Through living amongst the Azandi, learning their language and life ways through participant observation, Evans Pritchard came to appreciate the inherent logic in non-Western cosmological schemes. He writes, "We see that witchcraft has its own logic, its own rules of thought, and that these do not exclude natural causation. Belief in witchcraft is quite consistent with human responsibility and a rational appreciation of nature." And this perspective opened up innumerable new lines of inquiry. After all, if there is logic in the supernatural beliefs of the Azandi in Sudan, then could there not also be logic in the belief systems of other peoples throughout the world? Evans Pritchard came to the realization that belief systems necessarily require to be lived in, and to an extent experienced if they are to be understood to any degree beyond their immediate surface appearance, which is about as deep as the armchair anthropologists of the 19th century could get. This form of ethnographic fieldwork progressed significantly throughout the 20th century, leading to ethnographies that relate more directly to the topic of this talk, which I'll come to in a little bit. Another important movement within anthropology during the 20th century was structural or social functionalism. A.R. Radcliffe Brown, the guy in the middle, was the key proponent of this perspective in the first half of the 20th century. Essentially, the position holds that social structure is maintained through specific social activities. And he writes that the concept of function involves the notion of a structure consisting of a set of relations amongst unit entities, the continuity of the structure being maintained by a life process made up of the activities of the constituent units. This perspective has been particularly influential in interpretations of spirit mediumship and possession groups, perhaps most distinctly in Johan Lewis's social protest theory for peripheral spirit possession groups. From a functionalist perspective, spirits do not possess any form of ontological reality. Rather, they provide a mechanism for social functions to be achieved. This idea is broadly similar to the Durkheimian concept of the supernatural as an extension of the social. Supernatural forces such as gods and spirits are seen as personifications of the social system. They are appeased in order to ensure the continuity of social cohesion. It's easy to see why this approach has been dominant. It allows spirits to be taken into consideration without necessarily taking the position that they have any form of ontological reality. In fact, it explains them away. So from this perspective, the origin and purpose of spirits is purely social. But it's interesting because if you actually read Durkheim, that's not really what he says. I've got a quote here from him. He says, "It makes no sense that systems of ideas like religion, which have held such a major place in history, and from which people have always drawn the energy needed to live, are merely tissues of illusion. How could a futile phantasmagoria have so powerfully and permanently fashioned human consciousness? Surely the science of religions ought to operate on the principle that religion expresses nothing that is not in nature, for science deals only with natural phenomena. The question is, in what realm of nature do these realities belong, and what has compelled men to conceive of them in that singular form peculiar to religious thought? But to pose that question at all, we must begin by granting that the things conceived of in this way are real." So, anyway, going back to the not real Durkheimian interpretation, this perspective, however, inherently ignores the vast body of experiential as well as parapsychological literature, which clearly brings the assumption that spirits are simply social constructs into question. When we begin to take the experiences of individuals in the field seriously, we come to appreciate the fact that these entities are far from simplistic constructs. Indeed, they are complex and multifaceted entities that appear on occasion to impinge on our physical consensus reality and have a significant social role to play. And this is made abundantly clear in the case of Edith Turner's experience with the Ihamba healing ceremony of the Ndembu in Zambia. During this long and intense ritual, the ritual doctor attempts to remove the malignant Ihamba spirit from a patient afflicted with illness. At the culmination of this particular ceremony, Turner saw with her own eyes an unusual mass being extracted from the patient's back. She says the traditional doctor bent down amid the singing and drumming to extract the harmful spirit. I saw with my own eyes a large grey blob of something like plasma emerged from the sick woman's back. Then I knew the Africans were right. There is spirit stuff, there is spirit affliction. It isn't a matter of metaphor and symbol, or even psychology. Turner's personal realization that there is much more to the existence of spirits, and indeed the paranormal in general, than the reductive theories of anthropology have hitherto managed to explain, has essentially opened up a whole new arena of anthropological inquiry and understanding. The anthropologist Niels Babant has pointed to the huge benefits that come with treating spirits as informants during ethnographic research. While conducting fieldwork on the island of Ternate in Indonesia, Babant treated the spirits he encountered through entranced mediums as methodologically real, by using them as informants to further his understanding of Ternate politics. As in other societies in which spirit possession practices play a central role, the spirits incorporated in Ternate perform a specific and highly significant social function. They are brought back to be consulted on political matters of the highest importance. Through treating the spirits as methodologically real, Babant was able to get on with the business of studying the social and political reality of spirits, and recognise that the invocation of spirits does make a difference in the field, to both the anthropologist and to the people we study. So like spirits in Madagascar and in Africa, the spirits Babant encountered were political figures from history, brought forward to give advice on issues of modern politics, and as such they were key political agents, having a direct effect on the political decision-making of the present day. So looking at all of this, it would be easy to assume that the phenomena of Euro-American spiritualism and other spirit possession cults around the world are directly comparable. But the anthropologist Morton Klass warned us against overgeneralizing. He writes, "In the context of possession, spirit is a kind of portmanteau word that seemingly encompasses all the varieties of possessing entities that are believed in by people in societies in which possession occurs. Though subsumed under the single term spirit, the entities are in fact very different, even contradictory in many ways, and the nature of their interactions with humans also varies greatly. We should not therefore jump directly to the conclusion that the types of spirit mediumship we are most familiar with in the West are directly comparable with the practices described in the ethnographic literature. In Western spiritualist mediumship, for instance, mediums generally only incorporate the spirits of dead human beings, while in other cultures the possessing entities are much more varied. Alan Gould writes, "The discarnate entities which possess persons include in many cultures not just deceased human beings, as in Western spiritualism, but all sorts of gods, godlings, demons, devils, and animal spirits." So bearing this in mind, therefore, we need to consider the implications of parapsychological research, such as Julie Beichel's work with the Windbridge Research Centre, as on our anthropological interpretations of spirit mediumship practices in other non-Western societies. If, for example, we accept the evidence from psychical research that seems to indicate the continued existence of human personality after death, why should we not then take a fresh look at the ostensibly non-human communicators, gods, nature, spirits, etc., channeled in other traditions? Within the Western tradition, we are satisfied that a spirit is who it purports to be, so long as it meets certain personality-specific criteria. For instance, the spirit is able to provide accurate personal information about its life on the earth plane and about the lives of its acquaintances while alive. Similarly, in many non-Western societies, a particular spirit or deity, when incorporated, is recognized through specific socially and culturally recognized characteristics. For instance, in the Afro-Brazilian religion of Batuque, a medium must act in a certain way if they are to be perceived as genuinely under the influence of an encantado. Anthropologists Seth and Ruth Leacock describe this. They say, "Although in the early moments of the trance there may be some uncontrolled movements, the medium must quickly gain control if his or her activity is to be interpreted as representing possession by a supernatural being. It is certainly not enough to fall on the floor and thrash around, or stagger about, or make incoherent sounds, or give other evidence of having some kind of unusual psychological experience. The meaning of this kind of behaviour is ambiguous in Batuque belief. In order to prove that an encantado is really present, the medium must dance, sing the proper songs, and interact with the other participants in the ceremony in an acceptable manner. The behaviour that is most admired in the accomplished medium is very often the behaviour that appears the least frenzied and the most normal to the outside observer." So it seems that in other cultures they are using a similar kind of process to determine whether the spirits are real. And that's kind of where I'm going to end. Conclusions. Psychical research and anthropology have got a lot to offer one another. Experiential approaches offer a unique insight that brings into question armchair anthropological theories. Similar methods of discernment of spirits have been practiced in other cultures for hundreds of years, and the spiritual world is inhabited by innumerable classes of spirits, demons, and deities.